Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Debbie Marcantonio, and today I'll be featuring an amazing special guest. If you're looking to buy a home in the near future, you'll definitely want to tune in. On today's episode, you'll learn all about home insurance. Why is the right home insurance important, and what is and isn't covered? So please let me welcome Ian Blakeney, Personal Risk Specialist with USI Insurance Services. Hello, Ian. It's such a pleasure to have you join us today.
Debbie, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's get right to it. It's been a really unique and challenging time within the past year and a half, and a lot of people have transitioned to working from home. Can you tell us, does a homeowner's policy cover business equipment?
Sure. So as someone who's transitioned to working from home myself, this connects with me very, very directly. It will depend. So if you're having a conversation with your risk specialist, insurance agent, you need to make sure you articulate clearly what you have at home. And depending on your carrier, the company that writes your insurance, and the type of equipment, you may either be covered, may have to list it specifically on the insurance, or it might not be covered. But it's important to have that conversation directly with your agent.
That makes a lot of sense. So where I live in northern New Jersey, there are quite a bit of older homes, some from early 1900s. Can the age or condition of a house affect someone's premium?
Yes. So when you're looking at the age of your home, one of the biggest variables is going to, again, come from the carrier. Some carriers will write older homes, some won't. Some will look at the home and go, is it still in the original condition? And what that means are some of the main systems, the plumbing, the heating, the roof, the electrical wiring. Have those been updated since the original purchase of the home? Now, if your home's from 1890, I really hope so. If you're looking at that home, that some of those have been updated to purchase. If not, they may be disqualifying, or you're going to have a conversation when you're in the closing about negotiating that as part of your closing, that these sellers take care of updating some of those systems. A great example, when I sold my home in New Hampshire in the last year to move down to New York, our our furnace had a hole in one of the chambers. We had to negotiate and fix that before the closing for an FDA loan. So that was a great example of the buyers noticed it. We had that conversation. We took care of it. It allowed the closing to move forward. When it comes to the price of your home insurance, while some carriers will do older homes, if you have some of those systems updated, you will get discounts. So newer roofs, newer heating systems can have significant impacts on lowering your premium because the home's going to be in better condition and it's going to weather, it's going to handle weather or other potential events better. So depending on the condition and age of your home, you can see changes in your premium.
That is some great information, Ian. So I happened to check Home Depot's stock today, and it's at $325 a share, which is up from $152 a share in March of last year. So we know that home improvements are on the rise.
Yes.
Does making any specific home improvement lower or raise insurance premiums?
So kind of related to that last question, updating your roof is a huge variable. If your roof hasn't been done in the last 20 or 30 years, that's going to have a drastic impact on reducing the cost of your home insurance by improving the quality and structure of your home. You can also look at things like putting hail-resistant shutters. Depending on your location, if you're coastal, there can be big impacts from having wind resistance, hail resistance built into your home. Another improvement that some people don't necessarily think of Home Depot, but central station alarms, central station burglar, fire, water shutoff systems can also have significant credits for your home and protect you from significant losses proactively. One of the big things we preach at USI, what makes us a little different, is we don't just want to insure your home, we want to educate you on ways you can actually mitigate losses. So a water shutoff system is something you can install into your pipes that as soon as in a specific section a leak is detected, it shuts the water off. So instead of that pipe flooding your basement for an hour and a half until the water runs out, causing feet of water, damage, potential mold, loss of your property, it shuts it off after just a few seconds so that all of that loss is mitigated before it even happens.
That is such a great feature. I need to look into that. That's amazing.
It's one of there is cost to it, as there is everything, but it's one of the most important actual improvements I've made to my home. And we've seen significant losses that have been prevented with that system in place.
Makes sense.
We have no affiliation to any companies that do that system. That is a true thing I believe in.
Fantastic. So I understand that it's not just about the actual home that needs to be insured, it's about the exterior items as well. Like, for
Yes.
example, swimming pool, a play set, a trampoline. How do these affect premiums?
Sure. So as someone who just built a play set with a little trampoline attached, I've done a lot of work and research into this, not just as an insurance agent, but as a dad of a toddler. When you're looking at a pool, when you're looking at a trampoline, these are potential risks because anyone who comes to use it with your permission or gets onto your property without your permission can hurt themselves if they're not protected. So if your pool has a diving board, it isn't gated or fenced in, a lot of insurance companies aren't going to want to offer coverage because of the risk of someone hurting themselves significantly. If someone hurts themselves on your property in any way, you're exposed to a potential lawsuit, even if you don't feel you're at fault. We had a tree house at my old property when we bought it. It was rickety, it was way back in the corner, but we took it down because of that exact reason and the fact that you couldn't step on the ladder without your foot going through the moldy wood. Because if someone got up in there and fell, even though it was in the back corner of our property, we couldn't even see it, they could sue us. So if you're going to have a trampoline, get that netting system, fence it in your yard. Same thing with a pool. You also want to have that consideration if you have pets. We have an electric dog system that keeps our pet in the property. If you're going to have your pets loose on your property, you do want to make sure you have a conversation about the liability coverage on your insurance. And an interesting aspect of things that you don't think of attached to the home, your sheds. If you have sheds, if you have tree houses, you want to make sure that things like their roofs are in good condition. I've seen insurance carriers cancel coverage just because of mold or moss growing on the shed of a outhouse or on the roof of a shed away from the home. You wouldn't think, well, my home's in great shape, the roof's in great shape. But insurance carriers oftentimes, especially if you're looking for, more affordable, cost-effective carriers, will be very strict in their underwriting. So when you're looking at those other structures, those other items on your property, it's really important that they're secure and up to date.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Hmm.
So Ian, let's just say I have an extensive art collection. I don't, but let's pretend I do.
Sure.
Or high-end vintage pieces.
Okay.
Are personal items typically covered in a homeowner's policy?
This is my favorite answer. Yes and no. So a home insurance is going to cover what's called personal property. On top of just rebuilding your home, we want to make sure the things in it are made whole if there's a major loss. When you're looking at that and a company goes, hey, I want to take care of all those things, there are specific items, jewelry, artwork, like the collection you were mentioning, firearms, guns, coins, stamps, unique collections where there's what are called sublimits. Traditional sublimits are going to be anywhere between $1,000 to $5,000 per item maximum, unless you have a conversation with your agent and individually insure them either on the home insurance or on their own valuables policy. My uncle and I actually had a conversation recently. They had a $50,000 statue, which as a child, it had been there my whole life. We had knocked around and had no idea it had value. If that had been damaged by us or someone else, he didn't have it insured. At max on his policy before he came to us, he would have only gotten $2,000 for it and been out $48,000 in value. We were able to look at it, insure it for a very affordable amount for the full value. So if anything happened, it's covered. Any of those type of items, any uniquely valuable things, if you're not certain if they're covered, talk to your agent or risk specialist. It's better to have a conversation and make sure than to risk having a significant loss in value for something that you treasure.
Absolutely, 100%. So lately, we've experienced some crazy storms, and you talked about hail earlier. We even had a hailstorm a couple weeks ago. It was so scary, and it was in the middle of July. Storms can cause a lot of damage. Can you talk about what happens when a homeowner files a claim?
Sure. I believe you and I were on a phone call when your power went out during one of those storms a couple weeks ago. So yeah, it's been pretty intense lately. So as soon as a storm happens and as soon as you're uncertain, you have two choices. You can call your insurance company right away, or you can call your agent. One of the things I always recommend clients to do is have a conversation with me if you're not sure, but if it's significant, call your insurance company right away. Once the process starts, as soon as you call that insurance company, and here's where I think it's really important to know this, they're starting the claim process. Even if you don't end up filing it, they're starting a $0 claim because some sort of incident has caused you to call their claims department. That's across the board. Almost every insurance carrier is going to do it. So You can oftentimes talk to the carrier afterwards and go, hey, I'd like that claim removed. It didn't end up being anything. Here's the situation. A lot of the high-end carriers, the Chubbs, the AIGs of the world, are much more flexible on that than some of the more cost-efficient carriers that are looking at a different price set for homes. So depending on your carrier, it's always good to have a conversation with your agent right away. Just be like, hey, this happened. What should I do? I will always take that phone call because that's my job. I'm here to give you advice. I'm here to help you. I've had clients who've been like, hey, I had a G.I. Joe in the washing machine. It's like a $400 washing machine. And the conversation I had with her was, listen, your deductible on your policy is $1,000. It's not going to cover that washing machine. So don't even call your insurance company. You don't need a claim filed for something that's smaller. Home insurance is here for catastrophic events. That's something I can't emphasize enough. You don't want to use your home insurance unless you really need it. That's why you should have a conversation on where your deductible is set, where you're comfortable knowing, hey, if I have to use it, here's how much it is. But also so that you can understand, like, hey, I had a tree fall on my roof. It's a $30,000 repair. Yeah, I'm gonna use my home insurance for that. But if I had this washing machine scenario, I probably won't. So once that claim process starts, you're gonna either be connected from me, or if you call directly to the claims department, they're going to walk you through. Insurance companies' claims departments have experts for a reason. First thing I always tell people is I'm not licensed in claims because there's a huge process for claims. I'm an agent. I help build the policies, make sure you're protected in it. The claims people help you walk you through all the contacts, the process, the appraisers that they'll send out there to take a look at the loss, and they work and help you through that whole process. So that's what you're going to expect in the claims process with most carriers.
All right, fantastic. Well, that's why our clients love you. You're just a phone call away. That's awesome.
Well, that's the important thing. That's what you should be.
Amazing. So Ian, if I had a choice, can I not buy home insurance? Is home insurance actually even required?
Well, it'll depend. If you're getting a mortgage, yes, it's absolutely going to be required, because if something happens to that home, the mortgage company is going to want to make sure that their investment on the loan that you're getting is covered. It's just like if you buy a car with a lease, you need insurance coverage, or you buy a car with financing, because that company wants to make sure if you crash that the second you drive off the lot and haven't made a payment, that they're getting paid back for the loan. So if there is a loan scenario, yes, it is required. If you own your home outright, no, you don't necessarily have to have home insurance. Would I recommend that? No, but that's a conversation that I think is individualized and personal. If you are comfortable, if there's something happens and your home burns down, walking away and saying, I have the money to buy a new house or rebuild it myself, then that is absolutely your right, and I respect that. I personally am not in that scenario. I want to make sure that if something happens, I'm made whole, and home insurance is the absolute tool for that. So while I could go into many depths of the reason why, I think it's a really good personalized conversation to have with an agent, to have with your realtor, to have with your lender. Do I need it? Is it required for my mortgage? And then if it's not, I own this home. What happens if this home burns down or a hurricane comes or something happens? What is my financial situation? Have that conversation, and then we can make the right choice for you.
I agree. No insurance is way too risky for me.
I mean, that is where I stand. I have a little bias. I do work in this industry, but I also believe it because I have it.
Yeah, sounds great. So some buyers are weary about buying homes in flooded areas.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what happens if a house is in a flood zone, and is that part of homeowners insurance, or is that a separate policy?
So we live in New Jersey, so I feel like half of New Jersey is in a flood zone. So that is a reality. Flood is not as scary as it sounds, but it does have complications. So if you're in a flood zone, there are many different tiers. You'll hear a lot of different letters. I'm not going to go through them. But if you're in a place that floods regularly, it's considered a flood zone. If you have a mortgage, they're going to require flood insurance for the same reason we just talked about. It's an increased exposure to flood risk at that location. They want to make sure if something happens, it's covered. Flood is not covered under home insurance. Water is very complicated. Water scenarios are complicated. So complicated, we could make this video 4 hours long. We're not going to. But if you have questions about water, talk to an agent. I'm always happy to answer those. But when it comes specifically to flood, to runoff, to snow melt, water increasing scenarios, they're not covered on home insurance. They're covered by flood insurance. There are two different options. There's flood insurance through the federal government. It's called the National Flood Insurance Program. It's standardized no matter where you buy it from. Any insurance company can sell you a maximum of $250,000 in home coverage. It's going to be the same price if you do it that way. If that covers the value of your home, that tends to be a really good way to do it. If your home is more than $250,000, there are private flood companies. We work with multiple that can offer you unique solutions that can go up to $4 or $5 million in coverage. You know, if you're fortunate enough to buy those kind of properties, someday I would love to do that. That can also tailor more coverage than the National Flood Insurance Program because they're a private company. Depending on your situation, have that conversation. They're not scary, but they are an additional cost, especially if you have a mortgage that you're going to have to be aware of if you're buying a home in a flood area. And if you're buying a home in a flood area without a mortgage, it's still a conversation to have because that means there's just an increased likelihood and frequency that flooding happens there.
Yeah. Well, as long as they have the knowledge, I think they'll be able to make an informed decision.
And I think it's important to know, people often think of what are the biggest home insurance losses. Water and flood are actually the rising top reason for losses. It's actually past fire losses in the last 2 years. So those losses also occur frequently outside of flood zone. So even though you're not in a flood zone per se, it's good to have that conversation. I actually kept flood insurance living in New Hampshire, in the middle of New Hampshire, nowhere near water, because I was on a hilly property and we got a lot of snow. And when that snow melted, I got it the second year because I had a scenario where I didn't have it. It flooded my basement. I had to rip up my carpets. I ruined a dry vac trying to pull all that water up because I had to redo my finished basement. I wasn't covered because that snow melt, like I said, isn't covered by insurance. So there are scenarios. We're looking at your property, looking at your situation. We can talk about that and find affordable ways to protect you.
Very informative.
And
so
very
last question.
To rebuild that basement.
Yeah. Last question, but very important one. What would you say differentiates your approach to that of other insurance agents or brokers?
Sure. So I've worked at both a captive agency in my past, and that means I worked for a specific company like Allstate, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, I won't say where you only had one option for insurance. I'm a broker now. At USI, we work with over 40 different carriers. It gives us options to work not just through different carrier quotes who handle different property locations. So some won't quote close to the coast. Some are really good and favorable for high net worth properties. Some, you go into New York City, they don't want to write a brownstone in the city. Some will. So we have a lot of options for tailoring it to what your scenario is. But when we look at insurance, we're not looking at it as just, hey, we want to set up a policy and get you on our books. So unlike a lot of insurance agents, I'm not commission focused. I have a salary. I get paid very well to take care of people and not just put them on our books. So it allows us to take the time. Home insurance is complicated, even though it may sound simple. And that's why I spend time getting licensed, doing additional trainings, and spending the years in the industry that I have, is so that we can look at all the ins and outs and make sure what we're covering covers you properly, so that if there is the unfortunate situation that there's a total loss or a major loss, that you're made whole and you can sleep easy at night. I've seen too many clients come to us in situations where they were underinsured. They were quickly insured. They didn't know why their insurance was set for X amount of dollars. They didn't know they had a $5,000 deductible, and that's why their premium was so low, so that when the insurance was needed, they had to pay $5,000 out of pocket. That wasn't affordable to them. It's all about making sure we take the time to do what's right for you. And we look at all your risks. We don't just look at, hey, you're buying a new home. Great. Here's what the mortgage wants you to cover. That's not always necessarily the same thing as what your home needs to rebuild. So we take the time, we really look at your needs and we tailor it to you instead of just trying to go, okay, here's a quick, cheap thing. Let's get you taken care of.
That is so great, Ian. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Well, Ian, you have definitely given our homeowners and home buyers such great information. I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to answer some of my questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm always happy to answer anyone's questions anytime. No obligation whatsoever.
If anyone has any additional home insurance questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Ian. His contact information is located in the description below. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope you join us next time for another episode where we get to know residents, business owners, and local officials. Take care, everyone.